Let's try that. There it goes. That's really weird. Okay, well, geez, oh Pete, that's quite embarrassing. Welcome everybody to the stream. So you couldn't hear me. That's weird. I've got a button on my stream deck here, and my stream deck mute and unmute's not working. I just now, when you said that, realized that. I usually just click a button to go live, and it does all this magic stuff for me. And then I click a separate button for mute, and that doesn't seem to be working. And I don't know why, so I had to manually go in and unmute my microphone. Weird. I'll have to look at that afterward. It's been a couple of weeks since I've streamed, so who knows why that's happening. That's weird. All right, so what I was talking about is I want to do something unique today. I want to build a .NET application that has a shared library that I can use for testing different UI frameworks. And I want to build something that has everything, so I can compare, right? I mean, a lot of times people say, should I use Maui? Should I use Maui XAML, Maui Blazor, Avalonian, Uno? In the .NET world, there's just way too many UI options. Let's just be honest. There's a plethora of them. It is daunting how many they are, to tell you the truth. I would like to compare and contrast all those, and I'd like a simple application I can do that. Now, of course, I'm a mobile developer. I'm going to focus on mobile, but I'll also get some desktop support in there. I would like to do this with a database, and I'm going to use Couchbase Lite. I work for Couchbase, if you did not know that, and it's because it's what I know. I could use like SQLite, but then I'm going to have to like go look up more APIs, and that's always a pain in the butt. I've used SQLite years ago, and Couchbase Lite storage engine is based on SQLite, so it's like SQLite with some bonus features in many ways. I'd like to do that because I can use the travel sample database. That's what I was talking about when I was on mute. And then I don't have to build data sets and stuff. I know that data set pretty well already. The models are already out there. I don't even have to think about that code then. And what I could then do is I can get some database stuff pretty quickly wired up to talk to all these different UI frameworks. And I can compare and contrast like various things. One of the things I'm always interested to see is like how Maui is doing on Android, especially Maui XAML. It's historically been the low mark. I've back in Xamarin's days, I spent a lot of time trying to optimize Android as much as I could, but it's really hard because you're running two garbage collectors and you're running two frameworks. JVM, you're running JVM, the Java Virtual Machine, but you're also running the .NET, the Mono. And every C# object you make is also a Java object, right? And so, at least if it's talking to UI, and so it's really complicated. It can get into some crazy things, and so I'm always interested. Obviously, since like the Xamarin early days, leaps and bounds, it has improved, and I have to give kudos off to the developers that work on that, like John Peppers over at Microsoft and stuff. They have done amazing things to make that very cool. Obviously, there's always rooms for improvement, and I know that they've tried to get startup times down. I'd like to play around with that a little bit, so that's what I think we're going to do today. So I've got what I think is RC3 installed. Now, I'm going to keep doing this on my Mac. I may remote desktop into a Windows machine, though, eventually, if I have to use Visual Studio on Windows. But I'm a Mac developer. One of the big things of my stream and what I like to talk about is that .NET isn't just for Windows. You know, you can run it on Mac, you can run it on Linux, and that's really kind of important to me. I'm using Rider, and Rider is a great IDE. It works with all the different operating systems that you may love out there, and I could just click New Solution in here, and then it's going to ask me what kind of solution I want. So I'm going to start with a class library because I want one single library that has my models, has my database layer and all that stuff in it. And then I can just have that as a reference to all my different UI projects. And then I can compare and contrast. So basically what I'll do is in this library, I'll make view models and I'll make repositories and I'll make the authentication framework and all that kind of stuff work there. And then the UI love could be, you know, separated, and then we can compare. We can say, well, we know that the data is the same no matter what, right? But how does the UI compare, and what does it look like, and you know how easy is it to deal with? It's something that people ask me about all the time, and so it's something I haven't done this in a few years. Did this back in 2018, I think was the last time I took a Xamarin application at the time, and I also did it in native using C Sharp. So I did an iOS and UI kit and Mac app and app kit. And then I also did, back then Uno had just come out, if I remember right. And I did Uno at the time. And then I had a UWP also, from what I remember. It's been a hot minute since I did that. So I think I'm going to call this CBL.travel sample. And we'll say that that's the solution name. This is the shared library. So we'll just call this shared. Well, yeah, then people have to type that in though. I don't, because then that's the namespace for it. And I don't know if I like typing the word shared in over and over again. I think we'll just keep a travel sample for the project name also. Let's see here. Put solution and project in the same directory. We do not want to do that. We should probably make a Git repository for this. We want definitely .NET 8. We're looking for C Sharp. We're looking for .NET 8. And this looks like it would be a good starting point. Let's go ahead and start this and see what happens here. Nothing crazy going on here. Let me just get the IDE to the point where you all can see it, and it's taking up most of the screen. I know I have a plugin that does the screen stuff for me. Let's see here. Debugger analysis. There's some cool things going on here. That looks cool and neat. I don't really need... Well, let's just build. Make sure that we can build. Okay, that worked. So we build. We don't need class 1. Let's go ahead and just toast that. Class 1. See ya. Let's see here. So they got one project inside of this right now. We would like to make more. So let's go ahead and make a new project. And what we're going to make is a Maui. We want a Maui app. And I'm assuming this is Maui Xamarin. XAML, not Xamarin. Because I think Blazor is under ASP.NET. Now I've got the Avalonian plugin also. So I'm going to bring that in also. But let's see here. I'm pretty sure that ASP.NET is... See, I don't see Blazor in the list. That's really interesting. Ah, it's here. Okay, so under Maui, it would be a Blazor hybrid class server. Okay, this makes more sense to me now. All right, let's call this CBL travel sample .maui. And that will be our Maui project. Let's go ahead and see if we can get that working. We should have Maui now. That's always bad when everything turns red right away. Let's see if we can turn that front upside down. It's syncing projects, so this usually means it's pulling down NuGet packages. Let's just go ahead and try to build it and see what happens. Oh, that's always bad. Workloads must be installed. It's saying I don't have the workload installed. That usually requires the command line utility. Let's bring up a new window here. See if we can get this figured out. .NET workload install Maui is what you're supposed to do. I think I'm running RC2 right now. You can see that right here. This is the SDK version. So I need to get the SDK release candidate 3 installed. Let's go .NET. Let's go bring Google over here. We need .NET 8 RC3 Mac OS download. You can't download it. It's part of Visual Studio for Mac right now, and they only have RC2 available. Interesting, but yet I know I saw David's article, Maui RC3, .NET 8 Maui RC3. Yeah, release candidate 3 is right here. I wonder if it's only available for Windows. Oh wait, this is 2 years ago. This isn't the RC3. That's where's .NET? Let's do this. Maybe we do. Maybe RC2 is the latest. That's 2022. So 2022. I bet you RC. I think that .NET World suffers from just too many options picking the right. It is. It is. Yeah, there's a lot of options to be Gamer. 100% right. I thought that David had announced RC3, but I guess RC2 is it. So that's good though. That means I already have .NET 8 installed. .NET Collection mess up and improves your experience. I don't care about that. It's saying .NET workload update. I could do that. So, oh boy, sudo. One of the things that does kind of irk me a little bit is, well, typing my password wrong would irk me a little bit. One of the things that does bother me a little bit is the switch from workloads from NuGet packages. NuGet packages were elegantly simple way to bring in things, right? It was like, hey, if I needed RC, whatever version of Maui I wanted, I should just be able to go into my CS project file, add the references to that NuGet packages work. But now we have these workloads, and of course they come with templates. I get it. That's probably, you know, a good thing, but we should have Maui, hopefully, because I can see TV, iOS, Maui. There it is. All right. So this should hopefully mean I have it now. I do believe I'm going to have to close JetBrains and open it back again. I think I could try to resync, but if I remember, I had problems last time with this. Yeah, let's see what the errors are now. Platform version 21. Okay, well now that's an Android problem. I can solve that. That's pretty easy. Wait, what? Okay. So it won't let me load it? Wait, am I running regular Rider or EAP, the early preview version? I should be able to use... Why can't I see the code though for this? Oh, I bet you didn't think this is just too high. There we go. There we go. Well, I can fix platform code. If the problem is Android, we can fix that. That's pretty easy. So one of the errors I was saying is that the Android version was set to 21, and I don't want 21 anyway, so I'm gonna want 23. You used to be able to go in and let's see what they have now. Android, here we go. We want DX and we want D8 actually, right? DA would be the new. We want multi-dex. I promise you will need multi-dex. No, this is interesting. Huh. One of the things I was expecting is should be linking. I know that they say don't link on simulators because it's kind of a mess, but I don't know if I agree with that 100%. The problem is that you have to then do a release build to really see whether or not you're gonna be able to build or not, and that's never fun. And release builds, you have to link. I don't say you can't afford the disk space with not linking. We'll just do developer automatic for right now. We'll make sure in debug that that's also set to developer automatic. And that'll just build a profile, a provisioning profile, which is used in iOS for signing your application. Incremental builds are faster usually, but sometimes that's a little flaky. Supposedly it's supposed to be pretty stable. So I'm going to check that actually, and then we'll turn it off if it doesn't work. But the one thing that's bothered me a little bit is my Android configuration, because normally I would set Android support. Man, I think it's just easier to open in the CS proj file. Let's edit this CH proj file. Just take a look here and see what we got going on here with Writer. Oh, the other thing that's going to instantly bug me is that text wrapping is not working for some reason. You see here that it's font looks like it's big enough for the stream. Let me see if I can zoom that in a little bit more. My keyboard shortcuts are not working either. That's usually, well, that's closing and opening. I didn't want that. There we go. That's a close and open, but you was it? Oh, there we go. So you can use the mouse to zoom in and out. Usually it's plus and minus, but it looks like that closes different parts of the XML. So let's see here. Android Catalyst, that's good. Note for Catalyst. It's saying runtime identifier. I don't care for x86. To tell you for truth, that's a dead platform according to Apple. I'm just going to do ARM for right now. This is just an example. If somebody wants to use x86, they can, but I'm not going to care about that all that much. I'm looking to see. Okay, so here we go. Oh. Here we go. So here's our target platforms. This used to be in the manifest file. Oh, thank you. I'm glad to see it's clear on the screen. This used to be set in the manifest file, but now you have to do it in here. So API 23 would be Android 6, if I remember right. API, yeah, I think API 23 is Android 6. Let's see. What's Android 8? Android, is that 25? Android 8 API version. I'm gonna Google this real quick. I think it's 26. It's 26. We want 8.0 and higher. I'm not gonna screw around. This is just gonna be a modern application. I don't need Tizen. I don't care about that. Why am I skipping older versions of Android? Because it's just a pain in the butt to support, to tell you the truth. It's nothing more than that, folks. There's a kernel bug I know in Android 5.1 that was never fixed on many Samsung devices, and it like in Xamarin, it's just a mess. Android 6 was the first version that supported some level of device encryption. I've done a lot of development in enterprise, so for a long time that was like a baseline. But Android 8 really, and Android X really, what's come down to it, which is was getting rid of the API libraries after release 28. That really is where Android got a lot easier to develop, if you ask me. I write Kotlin all the time and Jetpack Compose. I love Android. I think it's a great platform, but I really hate supporting old versions of Android. So I'm not going to, because it's just a sample project. And then I don't have to worry about all the performance with that and this and that. So each one of these, this is, by the way, the platform on specific definitions inside the proj file for each one of the platforms. So you can see here that we have some build properties here, and this is going to be, I think, for Catalyst, and this will be for, we got two Catalysts, one for x86, one for 64. Oh, this is, no, this is Android. Now this is weird. We have two, release and debug. Never mind. All right, we got release and debug. And then in here we're saying we're going to support in Android all the popular processors. We're going to use D8 and what is it? What did it used to be? Boy, I'm showing my old age here. I don't remember in Android the linking tools for getting rid of things you don't want. It's changed. It's D8 and R8 is the new stuff, but it used to be I gotta make that config file. I haven't done it so long I can't remember what it is anymore. Debug, we need multi-dex. ProGuard, that's what I was thinking of. We're gonna use R8 instead of ProGuard. R8 is a newer solution that Google invented. ProGuard is tried and true. if you need ProGuard. I mean, you make a .ProGuard file in your project. You tell the linker what to include, and it won't throw it away by accident. And Xamarin and Maui specifically, at least in the past for me, this is always a problem where the linker would accidentally unlink something that I needed. And this, you're trying to make the Android executable as small as possible, because to get on the App Store, at least the last time I published, I think the app had to be AB and it had to be under 100 megabytes, if I remember right. There's an App Store size restriction. And so you don't want your app to be 400 megabytes. And literally, I worked on an enterprise app once that was 500 megabytes when you built it, without the linker. And if you brought the linker, and then we linked down to like ridiculously small amounts. I think it was, we were hovering at the 120 or 130 megabyte mark for Android, and iOS is much smaller. But I'm always worried about that kind of stuff. So I just set it up now, and I don't have to deal with it later then. So let's see here. In Android for debug, we're going to support ARM, and we'll support x86-64. And that seems like it's good to me. All right, that should work. Let's do a clean. Oh, build clean, I guess. There we go. Let's clean our solution. To build this project, the following workloads must be installed. I have those installed according to the command line. Let's go back to the command line and see what's going on here. Boy, we're not getting much done today here. We're fighting developer tools. I literally just built a project to test something on this machine not that long ago. So, .NET workload install Maui iOS sudo Maui iOS. Let's try that. And then let's make sure that we got the YouTube chat up in case anybody on YouTube's over there. I usually get a couple of stragglers over on YouTube, and I still don't have my streaming software set to show YouTube chat also, and it only shows Twitch. So I usually keep another screen, and I keep the YouTube chat over there so I can keep what's going on there. So even though it said I had Maui installed, I obviously it did not, because it's telling me it doesn't have it. So this will be good. I swear I use this though. This machine, this is my Mac Studio M2. I used this just last week to build a .NET Maui 8 application to test something for a client. So that's a little worrying. That I'm not sure why the workload would tell me now that it doesn't have it, when I know for a fact I built it last week. I mean, I had it compiling. In fact, I put some stuff in it based on that and given some recommendations. Weird. Sudo.NET workload install Maui.Android. We'll get Android, and then we'll get Catalyst. I usually recommend just debugging with Android with Catalyst. To tell you the truth, it's fast. OI. Spell it right, Aaron. Boy, that's thinking about it long and hard. The API for my understanding, workloads just call bring NuGet packages down anyways. It looks at a I think it's a JSON file, and looks at the configuration for this, and then pulls down all the bits for it, and sets up the templates, and then of course the caches those NuGet packages down. That's my understanding of workloads. Somebody could correct me if I'm wrong. I'm still old and used a lot of NuGet back in the day. It's pretty much how I've always shipped libraries, using NuGet. There's nothing wrong with NuGet. It's nice. All right, we got Android now installed. Last but not least, we need Catalyst, because I do want to play around with Catalyst. And I think it's the best way to debug, because I can just build a native ARM Mac application, and I don't have to run a simulator or an emulator, and I know that that's what it's going to look like. Yeah, you obviously want to test on each platform to see what it's going to look like, especially with Maui, but because it's trying to render native controls. Where like Avalonian, for example, that is more like Flutter, where it uses Google's graphics library, Skia. Well, Skia Sharp is not made by Google, but Skia is. And then there's a really nice developer on the internet, Matt. Boy, I hope I didn't. Pretty sure his name's Matt. That does Skia Sharp stuff. He's a cool guy. I've talked to him before on Twitter, and he seems to be like a swell human being. So let's see here. What directory am I in? CD developer, and then we want to go to this is CB. Yeah, travel sample. Let's take a look here. And is a solution file here? .NET build. Let's see if this works. I am using command line to build right now instead of Rider. I have been known to do that a lot, to tell you the truth. I like the debug messages I get inside the command line, and usually it tells me if everything's working or not in Rider. So let's see here, build failed. What are we getting? We're getting error, undetermined AB value, catalyst arm, edit the project and set the runtime identifiers. Well, that's not right. It shouldn't be using Catalyst ARM for Android. That would definitely be the problem. Let's see here. Runtime identifier Catalyst ARM is invalid for iOS also. So when it tries to build iOS or Android, it's trying to also build Catalyst for some reason. That's weird. Let's go see if we can fix that. We may be putting some bugs in. Because all I did was use the template to create this. Let's see what's going on here. All right, let's see here. Let's start with the top. We want Android, iOS, Catalyst. And if we're on Windows, we want Windows, button runtime identifier. Oh, this is what caused it right here. That's what caused it. I uncommented this code. Let's just kill this for right now. And see, because I think it's doing it down here. 13.1. And then let's see here. This would be item group icon, my splash. Let's see here. These are the controls to use. Boy, I wonder if this is set to release candidate 2. We should probably take a look at that real quick. Let's see if there's a logging extension update for .NET 8. I do not see it. Let's see 7. Yeah, I don't see 8. Let's go check versions. Oh, they do have a release candidate too. Here we are. Copy that version. Go back to our Rider and update that to package version. I'll save that. And then let's see here. Property conditions, target framework, Catalyst and debug. We want Catalyst. I don't think that that's right. I think what's happening here is it's trying to build Android here. See, it did not make the Android target properly. You can see here under our Catalyst debug, we've got Android support. If it contains Catalyst. Now the Catalyst platform here is right, but the Android support, all this stuff should be only for Android. Yeah, that's what's going on. Configurations. For iOS, we want to say environment variables. We don't care about that. So this is interesting. I set up the project, but the project does not seem to do, like I went into properties here and I set this, but it looks like when you set the build and debug, it doesn't know how to separate these out into separate configs. I don't know if that's a writer problem. That's my guess. Right? Because that's what's happened. It's very clear that this did not save and work right. Let's try this real quick. So let's take I'm gonna take this out. Let's save that. Save this and see if we can get a build working. So this would be desktop. Let's try to build. See if a build works. And then I think what happens is I need to make a separate section for Android. And then I would check those only in the Android section. I'll have to set those by hand. You can set verbosity and writer under build, execution, deployments, tool sets, and build. Really? Under build. Oh, it's right. It's currently building right now. Oh, maybe it's in properties what you're talking about. Properties. Under. I don't see that there either. Oh, goes back to a comment that you made a while ago. Sorry, it wasn't keeping track. I was talking to myself here. Okay, so that built. So that's definitely the problem here, right? So the problem is that the CS_proj file. Yeah, so if I go here, what we should need is a, that's interesting, .NET. Does it not know about Maui? Here's Xamarin. I don't see Maui anywhere in this list. I think I'm gonna have to do it by hand. Because I'm not seeing the target for Android at all. Even though I say, oh, let's see what target platform. Oh, that's just Windows. I have Android as a supported platform, but I don't have a target for it. Let's just try to do a debug here. So let's get rid of that. We'll say it's the catalyst we need. Android. So where's our new one? Put some comments in that this is for Android and see if we can get Android to show up. I'm assuming this is a beta problem. And let's just close this and say Android there. And that should, if we save that, we should hopefully get Android here in a pull down list. Nope. It still says Xamarin, iOS, and Mac, even though this is Maui. I also just noticed that. Interesting. That's really interesting. I wonder if let's just look at this in .NET Visual Studio real quick here and see what happens. Kind of curious to see if Visual Studio has the same problem. Oop. Developer CPL travel sample. Try to open the solution and see if now see, Visual Studio here for Mac has all three options, right? It's able to read. That's really interesting. But for some reason, let's go to edit properties and see what happens here, and then go to configurations. Yeah, I knew that Visual Studio for Mac doesn't have great support for first single project. Yeah. So it looks like you're stuck with either editing it by hand or Windows right now. But at least you can see here that I see all three projects now. So I see Android, I see iOS, and I see that Catalyst. That's what I wanted. I wonder if I reopen in Rider. Maybe it's just the CS proj file had to be reloaded. But that makes sense. Let's see if we see all three now. Nope, I still only see the two, even though I have a configuration in the CS proj for Android. Well, let me just try to run this on Catalyst to see if this runs at all. I don't want to waste a whole bunch of time trying to debug what is happening. I could do this offline. Then report back what's going on here. I don't care about the AWS plugin, to tell you the truth. That's fine. Well, something happened. Hey, it did work. Look at that. Look at me. And the count is going up. It's actually not that bad rendering. Yeah, Catalyst is not that bad. I mean, even for streaming, it's not bad. Oop, that's full screen. We probably didn't want that. Get on full screen. Really? Okay, so I double click on the toolbar. Okay, it does. Okay, it grows or shrinks then. Alright. Well, that gets us somewhere. We at least have Mac support working. We got iOS support now. I'm just curious. iPhone 13. It does know all my simulators, so let's try. I should have all the latest loaded. I'll go iPhone 15. And does it give me an iOS version? Only if I use iPhone 15 must only be on iOS 17 or higher. But then SE, I'd like to debug on an SE to tell you the truth. I'm going to do 16.4. I like to debug on an SE because the screen size is pretty decent. It's not too big and not too small, and it's the small screen size you're going to have on a mobile. So if you make it look great here, it's going to look obviously amazing on a Mac. So you should probably test the two extremes, both the SE and the Macs, to make sure that your UI is looking good and working right. So we can see here. One interesting thing would be, does dark mode support work? So you can go to developer here and see if dark appearance works. Like natively, this is just magic. Oh, it does. Okay, so Maui's supporting dark mode out of the box. That's good to know. You can double click on the home button up here, and that should give you a list of running applications, but it's not right now. That's interesting that the simulator no longer shows you the running applications. You have to now use App Switcher? That's a weird keyboard shortcut. You used to be able to double click on home here. Oh wait, now it's working. Let's try that again. Yeah, there it goes. So it is working. It's pretty slow load time though. See that? See how long it took for rendering the UI? If I was starting a Greenfield mobile app today, what stack would you use? It's a great question. It's a really, really great question. It's gonna really depend on money. I'll be honest with you, right? It's gonna depend on money and the team that I have helping me build. If it's me by myself and I'm building a mobile app and it's just for me and I'm just doing it and I'm trying to do it for my personal gain or for like maybe a business I'm baking or something like that, I would go native. I would go native Swift UI on iOS land, and I'd go Jetpack Compose on Android land. And then for Mac, I would probably use Catalyst to bring in support for my iOS app for Mac. Or not, excuse me, not Catalyst. Swift UI would support both Mac and iOS, iPhones and iPads. So that one Swift UI app would get me all those. And then the only thing I have to worry about really is Windows. But I make the argument that Android apps now run on Windows if you're running newer versions of Windows. I probably wouldn't even write something in Windows. If I was doing an app personally, that would be the answer. If I was at a company, it depends on the developers that I'm also working with, right? Because if I have a bunch of .NET developers, I'm going to use Maui. If I've got a bunch of JavaScript developers, probably React Native. If I've got a bunch of developers that are really, and the business also, right? The business, it comes on to like the UI. If the business doesn't care about the UI so much, I might even recommend Dart with Flutter. And I've done some Flutter stuff, and Flutter's pretty great. It's a clean code base. It's like Avalonian in the sense that the Skia Sharp draws all the controls. So the issue, though, is that you're never going to have anything that looks native. It's not going to look like an iPhone application that Apple wrote. And that also means you don't get on iPad, you don't get split view with 3 columns. And for some people, that's a pretty big deal breaker, because that is something that you're used to seeing on an iPad application, is that split view with the your navigation and then your main and then your detail view, right? And if you don't have that support and you have to build it yourself, it's a lot of work. So that's where native kind of comes in, that you can do that. But in Flutter, you get basically a flyout, and that's about it. That it's building nice looking iPad apps in Flutter is really hard. Same thing with React Native. In fact, if you ever use an iPad, go try to download the Facebook app and see how bad that is. That's written in React Native, and you get all the answers you need to know about how bad iPad support is in React Native. It's not good. In fact, it doesn't even look like a proper iPad app at all. It looks like a web page that they just rendered in a web view for iPad. It's very clunky, to say the least, and I think they do that. I'm not sure, but it does not like the iPhone application, which looks like a native mobile application and runs pretty decent. Those are my opinions. Are always support your team, right? If your team has got a bunch of skills, try to use your team's skills to your advantage as much as possible. All these frameworks work pretty well these days. Flutter is well supported from Google. Avalonians like the Xamarin these days of the world in .NET. Maui supported by Microsoft. The only thing, I guess, I know, I actually had some customers talk about Blazor quite a bit and use that for mobile. I'm going to speak purely from my experience in enterprise development specifically. In enterprise development, Blazor is a really tough sell for me. And the reason why is because it uses a web view. And the real problem with enterprise development is when you have to go multi-country, and you have to go into countries like China, where they have $80 burner phones, Android phones, that have really bad processors that are really slow. Maui is already slow as it is on Android, and you put it on a really bad processor, you're just going to run into nothing but problems. You really are. The rendering on these really bad phones is just terrible. They're just crap phones. And so you're already kind of playing with fire there. And you add in all the latency and delay and stuff. It's not cool. So for those kind of phones especially, I try to get as close to the iron as possible, and usually Flutter or Native work pretty well for those. React Native is still using VC8, for some of its rendering of JavaScript and stuff, and that's single threaded, so you're going to run into some performance problems there. On Android specifically, I'm talking about really, really cheap $80, under $100 burner phones. We used to call them burner. I think they call them throwaway phones. I don't know what the modern term is for that, but that's like you can buy it and just throw it away when you're done because it's a cheap phone. Those it's really hard to support those on the cross-platform libraries that have not necessarily, they have hindrances to make that code work cross-platform. The only thing I haven't really played with and I can't really speak to is Kotlin multi-platform. I tried it about 4 months ago, and doesn't have great support for Windows and Mac. So when it's multi-platform, they're really saying it's iOS and Android. And for me, a true multi-platform issue, you should be able to run it on a desktop, some kind of desktop, right? So I didn't really think that it was prime time ready yet for going out there and supporting. I think it could be in the future, and I love Kotlin as a language. So Kotlin multi platform may be also something in the future, KMM. And then the other one that is kind of similar to that but different is Jetpack Compose for multi-platform, and that I know is super early on. If you go look at any of the code for like supporting for certain platforms, it just says code will be released at a later time. It's super early. A lot of glitches even in iOS. I did try this not too long ago, and I felt that it was still way too beta-y for me, being something that I would recommend to like an enterprise company to use. I usually try to use things that are tried and true, that you can push out releases to production as fast as possible, get and have a decent user experience, and run on all the possible devices that you think your end users are going to be using. At least trying to touch most of those platforms. In enterprise specifically, usually it comes down to like security features. Like I worked at an accounting firm for years, and when we wrote mobile apps, we had to make sure that the data was encrypted. And in Android, anything under Android 8 did not support hardware level encryption, and so we would actually check and only allow our apps to be installed even and run on devices that supported hardware encryption, because they had client data and they didn't want that leaving the client's device. And it's really important data that they had, so they're pretty adamant about that. That also had an advantage that I didn't have to worry about burner phones necessarily anymore, because usually the hardware encryption phones are a little bit more expensive phones, and they have better processors than Android's land. Apple, pretty much anything in the last 10 years is super fast, so you don't have to worry about performance. What do you think of Ruby on Rails framework? Ruby is great for building APIs. I mean, remember, Microsoft stole MVC's concepts from Ruby. It's Ruby is a great platform, and man, if you're building APIs and you know what you're doing with Ruby, it's really fast. And Ruby, the guy was from Japan that made it. I wrote Ruby on Rails a couple of APIs years ago, and I mean, we're talking like 27 maybe, 2007, 2008 maybe, something like that. It was a really long time ago. I remember that. And it was fine. It's a great language. It reminded me a little bit of Python, and maybe, Python really wasn't big back then. It reminded me of writing in Perl and VB put together. It's a .NET, MVC. .NET MVC really reminded me a lot of Ruby on Rails. I was like, oh, okay, Microsoft stole the MVC pattern and kind of threw it here, and it's pretty good. The tooling was very similar. I'm starting to build an app for myself. I can see if it takes somewhere. A few people trying to pull in for help. For now, I'm trying to stay API focused and divert decisions. I appreciate the insight. It really does depend on the skill set, right? If I'm doing it personally, it just comes down to what do I know, what languages do I know, and what am I going to struggle with, right? I know .NET really, really well, so I feel comfortable writing in .NET. I feel like I could probably solve most problems. I was a tech lead for years for Xamarin, so I feel pretty comfortable there. I know XAML pretty well. I know the native platforms really, really well. So I know iOS, SwiftUI, I know decently. And Jetpack Compose, I consider myself I've done it for like a year and a half. I feel pretty comfortable in Jetpack Compose land. Or even Android views, that's fine too for me. The platforms I'd feel a little less shaky on is like React Native, Avalonian, I have not. I've only done POC with, but it's .NET and it's XAML, so I think it'd probably be fine. I'm just not sure if there's any kind of gotchas in Avalonian that I haven't experienced yet because I've only done POCs, and that's usually what ends up happening, right? It's the rendering. What really ticks off clients or people that are using your mobile app is when it doesn't work right, and Android specifically is a lot of devices to check for to make sure everything works right. And there's always in versions of the operating system also. It's a very daunting task when you want to build a mobile app for Android, and if you have a platform that you can't trust, that's hard. That's really hard to validate that it works on all those different platforms without problems. And when you're just a single soldier, I always say then stick with what you know well, and that's going to help you at least try to alleviate some of that testing you have to do to guarantee that it's working on devices you think it should work on. And so that's when I don't recommend going and learning something new, because if you're trying to learn like Flutter and Dart, you already have a challenge of learning Flutter and Dart. You don't want to add on like supporting a bunch of different versions of Android that may or may not work or have some kind of bug that you don't know about. You don't want to add all that tech debt against you. So try to minimize your tech debt by using things that you know well. And that way you can focus on building the app and not a bunch of crap that's just randomly breaking and it's not your fault. Why did I switch to .NET? I haven't switched to .NET. I've always used .NET for... Well, okay, that's not true. .NET did not exist when I started developing. I started in C and C++, so in 96 when I started development, I pretty much used C and C++ for the first 7 or 8 years of my career. I did some Perl, but then .NET came out in 2001, and I had to do a project for a school system. We were like a contractor company that was working on some external software to integrate into Active Directory, and we had some C code to do this, but it was a mess. There's beasters and C strings and all these other weird things that the C version of the API supported, but .NET was like super awesome. It was pretty great. So I was like, hey man, this is way easier code to maintenance. So I switched over to that and fell in love with C#. Thought it was a great language. Still do to this day. My job requires me to know both mobile platforms for both native and for .NET. So in Flutter, so in React Native. So because I have a job that requires me to know all these platforms, I just know all of them. .NET is the only reason I'm doing a lunch stream with .NET is because I miss .NET. From time to time, I just like to play with it and see what's going on with it and see how Maui's working and stuff like that. And I do talk to customers from time to time that are using it. In fact, I just had one I was talking about earlier in the stream this week that was having some questions about .NET 8, and so I threw together a POC for them to look at. So I got to keep my chops up in .NET, and I focus my longer streams at night on both native iOS and native Android, just because it's popular. It's really popular. So, and I also have to keep my chops up there. The only thing I haven't really streamed yet is Flutter, and I probably should do that at some point in time. It's not bad. It's actually a pretty decent framework. I didn't mind it. Yeah, I keep an open mind. I like to get paid, and usually, if you know all the frameworks and you just have an open mind and you'll do what somebody does, you usually can keep getting paid. And usually, companies will value you more because you're less focused on technology stacks and more about what the client's looking for, what the app needs to do. I try not to get myself bogged down with being a champion of saying, well, I have to use React for everything, or if I've got to use Angular or Maui or native. It's like, well, what team am I working with? What are their skill sets? If I got a bunch of C# developers, .NET totally makes sense. If you got a bunch of web developers, then Dart or React Native, it's going to make way more sense. I've never seen Ruby on Rails ever be used by enterprises, to tell you the truth. I've never once worked at a company that used Ruby on Rails. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist in enterprise, but I've been primarily focused my career on enterprise development. I've never seen it. I've always done Ruby on Rails either for personal or for contracting work when I did some work on the side. And the Ruby on Rails work I did definitely was on contract work on the side. But I know that like GitHub uses Ruby on Rails. And so, I mean, that's a pretty big client. GitHub's one of the largest developer websites in the world. So if it's good enough for GitHub, it's good enough for a lot of people, I think. Web is going to be web is going to be the place where 60% of developers are hanging out. I mean, JavaScript is super popular these days and it runs on every platform, and it's really hard to deny that web is, if you're looking to get paid, I mean, obviously get into React in front end there or in back end. You got a lot of choices in back end. Java's popular still with Spring Boot. .NET's popular with ASP.NET. You've got Node, and I mean, a lot. Usually, Node is tied more to modern web and Next.js and those kind of things. But I've seen people use Express and build stuff, and Python was really popular. I'm shocked at how popular Python is with Fast API frameworks like that. And I've written some Fast API stuff about a year ago. I wrote the tutorials for the original tutorials on the developer portal at Couchbase in Python, and it was fine. I'm not a Python developer by trait, so my syntax looks terrible, and I always have to have Python developers remind me it needs to be snake case or this case or that case, and I go through a lot of code reviews and somebody tells me the code solid is just the way you name your variables and stuff is not very Python-like. That's fair. I don't use Python all the time, so it's hard to get used to. But I use .NET a lot in my career. It's honestly how I paid the bills for many, many years, probably from 2004 until... No, 2006 until about 2010. And then I went native development for a while, native mobile. And then actually, most of the developers hated Object-C. And so I stumbled into Xamarin in 2010-ish, 2011, because I had some developers that I was working with that refused to learn Object-C. And Xamarin was expensive. It was about $1,000 per platform back in the day. But it was still... better than having developers not want to write apps at all. So I went down the Xamarin road, and for years then did both Xamarin and native. And primarily Xamarin when I worked at EY, which is a big cutting firm I used to work for. They were a big Xamarin shop. We had some native stuff. We had some stuff that was done in Cordova, which is a web framework, or Apache, what was it called? PhoneGap was the original name for it before it got named Cordova. And I've done quite a bit of Cordova, more than I want to admit to, probably. So here's the thing, folks. I know that this is going to be really unpopular opinion, but I liked Object-C. I thought it was fine. I have to always preference that with, I started my career as a C developer on Solaris, and it's a Unix platform. And so to me, the syntax just meant, okay, when I use these brackets, I'm telling the compiler this is Object-C code, not C code. But I can mix and match C, and I knew C pretty well. So I was like, hey, this just makes sense to me. In fact, they had release counters. I was like, release counters are nice. This is a elegant way of self-memory management without needing a garbage collector. Of course, we have garbage collectors and later versions of Object-C. But when I started Object-C, there was just release counters, and they were fine. You just had to keep track and subtract or add from your release counter. Then they made auto pools, and then, of course, the garbage collector. But Object-C got a bum rap, I think. It was, if you understood C, I thought it wasn't that bad. Yeah, well, that's rough. If you had a month to learn to deliver, that's crazy talk. Object-C is pretty complicated to learn in a month, especially if you understand like pointer syntax. I mean, if you're using C#, you use the new keyword, that's a pointer, right? So come on. I think most C# developers understand pointers just fine. I think that's also a bad rap. I think the syntax of understanding when to use ampersand versus the star is complicated, reference versus non-reference, and star being able to get a reference for the next address available, and all those kind of tricky things that C can do. You get yourself into some pretty complicated code quickly, and so that syntax can look very daunting to new developers in the C land. So C# is an elegant, simple language to make that kind of coding easier, if you ask me, because in C# you still have to worry about things like memory management and stuff. In fact, there's the disposable pattern. It still exists. And there's a lot of unmanaged code out there. ADO.NET, there's a lot of database libraries that you have to dispose of your database stuff when you're done. And you don't want to leave things hanging out. And the out keyword, that's what's still out there today. And the out keyword passes it by a reference so that you can change the value of it and send it back out to a variable versus a copy. So I would say that C# has all the features that you'd want in C with a much easier to use syntax, in my opinion. But yeah, TBD Gamer, that sounds like that's hell. That would be hell on earth to learn Object-C in a month. I mean, I was looking if I knew C already, so Object-C wasn't a huge stretch. And I did a small amount of Mac programming back in like 2004. No, not it had to been 2008. Yeah, because no, let's see. When did Mac OS come out? When did iMac come out with Mac OS? No, it was 2000 and let's see. I was at the. It would have been when I was at Bigger Telephone, so it would have been in 2003. I did my first Mac application in Object C, right around 2003 time frame. I want to say. I think Panther was out at the time, like Jaguar Panther 10.2 or 10.3 was out. I remember I had to get a certification to work on a particular project, and Apple had the certification program back then, and I got the certificate somewhere in a box, but it was a very hard test. I do remember that I studied my butt off to be able to say that I knew what I was talking about, both coding and then around the operating system that they had at the time. I don't think they have the certified developer and the certified like administrator program anymore. But I wrote some stuff that they used to have a library that was based on OpenLDAP that allowed you to connect like Mac. They had a Mac server product back then, and you could have LDAP is a server that can basically do authentication with Kerberos. It can it's like a database that for like contacts, and well, X500 is also that 509, but LDAP's a very popular database. Like Active Directory, which is what Microsoft makes, is a very popular LDAP implementation. I happen to be working at a company that we had a very large open LDAP implementation. It was a Unix-based platform at the time, and I had a great integration between that and Active Directory. But I also wrote for the school system integration between open LDAP and Apple's version of LDAP. And so I had to get a bunch of certifications so that we could get paid for that. It was a fun time, to say the least, and I learned a bunch, and I like learning on the job. So I had known Object-C from that project well enough that when iOS came out, I picked up UIKit pretty quickly. The patterns are very similar. So if you know UIKit, you can learn AppKit very quickly, and vice versa. So let's see here. We've got this .NET application kind of working. We know that Android's not working right in Rider, but I'm going to chalk it up to a Rider problem right now, not necessarily my code, because if I open this up in VS for Mac, meaning to attend. Sorry, I have to divert the stream. Appreciate it. Yeah. Hey, you have a great weekend too. I'll be back on Monday. We're going to continue working on this thing probably for the next couple months. I'm going to try to get all kinds of UI in this thing. It's going to be pretty cool. And we can compare and contrast it. We can look at code. And one of the things I'm very concerned about is like, how much is it the maintenance? How much code does it take to do this very same thing in all these different ways of building something? I find that a lot of times as a lead, I get asked this a lot, and I'd like to just point to code and say, well, go look for yourself, right? You can go look here and see that, very much Molly costs you this much, and from a code standpoint, this will cost you this much, and, that by doing that, we can compare and contract. So I do appreciate your time, TB Gamer, and I hope to see you next week on the stream and stuff. I do only have about 10 minutes left, so we know, I just want to double check this. I want to make sure I'm not a liar. I don't like being a liar. I'm pretty sure if we were to open this back in Visual Studio for Mac, don't cross the streams ever, by the way. Don't open a project both in Rider or VS for Mac like me and be changing code, because you have a small chance that a file lock's been put on the file in Rider, and then you try to modify Visual Studio Code, and you can get some undesirable results from this. I know this from experience. So please don't do that unless you know what you're doing or you're just read-only. But if I go here, so Android shows up in here. So I know for a fact Android, so the CS project file is working because in Visual Studio for Mac, I see the Android. So this seems to be like a bug in Rider. And we could also do this. I could boot up my Windows PC, which is over there in the corner. We can remote desktop into it and open this project in Visual Studio for PC and validate that Android works over there. And that would confirm that, okay, this is a Rider bug. And then we should probably do the right thing. And so I don't have anything in the reference. Yeah, so that's going to make sense here. So if we look, I left it blank because I just wanted to make sure that Android would show up. So if we go look here, this is my fault, and I'll fully take blame for that because I'm the one that did it. You'll see here, I don't have anything inside here. I just have it, hey, if this is target Android and the configurations debug, and it's just blank. I don't tell it to do anything. So I'm going to have to look up the, I know I want things like D8. I know I want things like R8 for the compiler and for the linking tool, right? So I want those, the latest versions of those. I don't want to use ProGuard. I don't want to use the older DX, I think it is. I want multi-deck support because I'm going to need that. If you go into Maui, you're probably going to need multi-deck support. I don't know if we have enough time in the stream to explain a dex file in Android, but every object has got a reference to an integer in Android. Okay, and the dex file is that reference of like, here's everything that's going to be in this app, and this is the integer reference for it. And so when you say multi-dex, you're saying that the file, the amount of references you have to objects, is too big to fit in a single dex file. It's going to need to be in multiple dex files. This is the easiest way to explain the multi-dex. It's actually way more complicated than this, but I'm trying to trivialize down it to something that somebody could consume if they don't understand the concept. And so because Android and .NET runs both the JVM and the Mono shared runtime usually, you have a C# object and a Java object at the same time. And what ends up happening is Microsoft has a bridge that they listen on to, that they go through and they say, oh, anytime you create a Java object, create the C# object. And if the Java object falls out of lifecycle, they'll clean up the C# object and vice versa. Okay, then that's there's a bridge that exists in the Android world that you can kind of listen on when these events happen, so that you can kind of see this. And that's how Xamarin and .NET works. Well, that means you're going to have double the amount of objects, okay, compared to a native application. So in a native application, you may not need multi-dex, but at least in my experience, almost every single time I built a Xamarin Android application or Maui, I've always needed multi-dex because I just, the dex file gets too big. And so I almost always just turn it on because I know that that's the game we play over here in Android land. So I'm gonna have to look up those flags and set those because neither one of these IDEs, at least on Mac, seem to be supporting that. When I go in here and right click, there's no ability to edit the project like you used to be able to edit the individuals because this is a shared project. And you know, if I go to general here, it just says multi frameworks, and it doesn't give me that many options. And then Rider is no different. Rider is the same thing where if I were to go and look at that project solution, go to properties here, you'll see that I can see the projects and stuff, but if I were to go into the debug releases, you see I have some options here, but when I check them, they're not working the way I want them to work. We had this problem earlier. I'll check them again. I'll show you what ends up happening. We want multi-dex, and this is what I was talking about earlier. We want D8, and you'll want under Code Shrinker, you want to use R8, and then we want to link assemblies only. In iOS, we should also be, well, for a debug build, the argument is don't use the linker because it's just going to slow things down. But the theory would be is then if you only use the linker in prod builds, release builds, you won't know if the linker is broken until you do a release build, and then you're going to be really frustrated. Incremental builds will help with that. So you could do link frameworks only and then do incremental build, and that's going to get you some performance gains. I do admit that do not link is pretty popular for simulators because then you're not worrying about dealing with the how long it takes to build, which is terrible sometimes, and so you don't want that. Now what's going to happen here is I just created those entries, but the problem is I don't think it knows where to stick those. And so if I were to go and edit the CS proj file, what's going to happen is I think it just throws them in the first place it could find. And that's a problem because if it's not like, so yeah, I see it put these options in the catalyst. Well, Catalyst doesn't know anything about Android. So when I start putting these options for Android inside of Catalyst, that's going to be bad, right? So I need to cut these out, and they need to go into the Android target. And so this is a bug in Rider, I believe, is the case here. So let's see here. That's right. Mono Touch Fast Development only works for iPhone, not for Catalyst. We don't have an iPhone target yet where we define this. So I need to delete those because it's going to get, the code signing key is fine. But because my Apple developer account for an iPhone developer should handle signing Mac applications also. But the fast build's only for iOS. I think that this will fix at least it so I can build again Mac. Let me just make sure I can still build, that I didn't break the build. Make sure the app works. But for whatever reason, no matter what I do, I can't get Android here to show up. And if I edit configurations, I don't even see an option for for Xamarin Android, even though I have it installed. So I'm not, like I said, the only thing I can think of is this is some kind of bug in Rider, and I'm running Rider EP early access preview. So this is you can see here it's an early access preview. The reason why I needed that is because I'm using .NET 8. And so in order to use .NET 8, I needed to use the beta. So I'm kind of kicking myself in the butt. Trying to use .NET 8 because that comes out next month. Why would I build something that's going to release in .NET 7 and have to migrate to .NET 8? Why not just build in .NET 8 to start with? But obviously I'm hitting the hey, this is a release candidate, and not all the IDEs and stuff have got this all supported. That probably puts another check mark against multi-platform, right? Because the tooling is so difficult. Android comes out releases every year. iOS comes out releases every year. So if you're gonna do multi-platform, you have to deal with all the tooling problems you're gonna run into. And I promise you, there are problems. Flutter is not perfect, especially in iOS. Getting that to build can be sometimes tricky. And getting day one release for like iOS, the next release of iOS and all the features is not gonna happen. It's usually day 2 or 3, and the same thing with Maui. And so you have to take all those into account when you're building mobile apps. But we have the core basics for us to start our journey here, right? So the last thing I want to do is just make sure I can do a reference pointer. So I'm going to go to my dependencies here and manage references, and I'm going to add it to my shared project. So that way, when we start on Monday, I can make sure that this works. I can make a class here, and I can call that class from inside my Maui code. And then what we can do is we can add in other UI frameworks. For example, I guess before we leave, we could do this real quick. We can make another project. And instead of making a Maui, we'll make a iOS and Catalyst app here. We'll call this CVL travel sample. And we'll call this UI kit. We should probably call it iOS. Yeah, we should probably call it iOS. I hate underscores. UI kit, like that. And this is going to be a iOS application, and I'll make a separate Catalyst application. Well, actually, I should be able to add a Catalyst target to iOS, because Catalyst just gives you the ability to add on. I'll have to check into that. I'm not quite sure how to do that, to tell you the truth. That'd be an interesting thing to journey. I know this is how we make an iOS application, though. And this would be an iOS native application then. And we should have things like storyboards. Yep, here's our launch storyboard file. And here's our scene delegate. And this would give us the ability to make a native UI kit version of a iOS app that's using .NET 8. And this should also launch. So if I were to switch that over to iOS here, I'll set the code signing key to be my developer automatic, and I'll tell it to link frameworks only. I'm not going to use incremental builds, like I said earlier. Let's see here. Is there anything else I want? I want full logging and debugging of symbols. That's important to me. I think that's going to be good for debug. And what we should be able to do is just click on this, and we should get a blank application, because there's no storyboard other than the launch storyboard. And if I look at app delegate, I'm going to assume it just builds a view controller with a blank window that says hello iOS. So there's no storyboard file or anything associated with this. So it should be a relatively terrible example app. Yeah, that's it. So we know we have iOS support. We know that we have Maui support, and we'll add in some other platforms. We'll add Avalonian, we'll add Uno, and then we'll start building some UI in each one of those. We'll take some data, throw it on the screen, and compare between them. I think that's a fun thing to do. Let me add my reference here real quickly, and then I can stop this stream. So let's go to our reference here. Open our iOS and go to dependencies here, and we'll add a reference to our shared library, not this one right here. This is going to be where all of our models are, all of our services, our repository code for just getting data and stuff. And I'll probably write that stuff off stream because it's kind of boring, but obviously it'll be on GitHub if you want to go look at it, because really we're going to focus on comparing these UI libraries together. So That's gonna be a stream today, the lunch stream. I do have to go here. It's 1:08, and I still got to get some work done before the end of the weekend. Hey, I hope you all are having a great time. If you're watching this on demand, thanks for watching. I'll be back on Monday for the .NET lunch stream. Also be doing my native stream. We'll be doing some more Swift UI. Those are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if you check my Twitch schedule, you can see that. I look forward to seeing you on a future stream, and y'all take care and be kind to each other. We're in this together, folks. So take care, and I'll see you guys in the next stream.